Hello, everyone, and welcome, and thank you for joining us for today's Alliance for Women Film Composers Inside session, Demystifying the Reel. My name is Alexa Borden. I am the Director of Communications for the IWFC. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce today's incredible moderator, Grammy-winning composer, violinist, and vocalist who scored Ginny and Georgia, which is currently on Netflix, The House That Jack Built, and Anita, Lily Haydn.
Thanks so much. So happy to be with everyone. This is my first Inside session that I'm hosting. I am delighted to have a very fancy list of guests here, starting with composer and violinist Chanda Dancy, who is celebrating, who's about to jump off to go have an Academy screening of her new film Devotion. She's also known for her film Aftershock and I Want to Dance with Somebody. We were at the Sundance Labs together, which was great. And we have Sam Hulick, who is the co-founder of ReelCrafter, and is also a wonderful composer and known for the Mass Effect trilogy. And then A-list agent Randy Gerston, who is a fountain of insight, who is known for working with everyone from Nicholas Bertel to Laura Cartman to Jeff Russo and Lauren Balfe. And I'm lucky enough to be the beneficiary of his tutelage as well. And we're talking about how to make a reel. What's the best? What are the best practices? And I was putting together a general reel for some people that were interested in me, and I went to Randy and said, "What am I doing? What do I do?" And he had so many great ideas. I thought this would be a great topic. And then, of course, he said, "You have to use ReelCrafter," which I had been putting off doing. And of course, everybody I know is using it and just thinks it's the best program ever. And I talked to Chanda, and she said, "Oh yeah, got to use it." So, without further ado, let's just put this in context. Randy, what do you? I wanted you to start because I wanted you to talk about what you feel are the best practices for making a reel. What's your philosophy, both for genre-specific reels? Do you think it's good to say, drama, or what are the different categories that you think are effective? What are, when you're making a reel for a project, for a specific set of people, specific audience, and also just a general reel for, this is what my vision for me as a composer is. So why don't we start with you there?
All right. Hello, everybody. Glad to be here this morning. The whole topic of putting reels together can be not complex, but I would say complicated because every situation is different. And I would start by simply saying, since Lily brought up the word general reel, that we generally don't do general reels. They once in a while, somebody will request a general reel. That is normally going to be an executive in the music department of a studio, who sometimes they create just databases of composers, and then when they look up an agency such as our agency Fortress, they can see a list of the different composers, and they have a general reel. But I don't send them, unless they really force me to, and that's because whoever's listening to those general reels will mostly get the wrong idea of how a composer would want to audition their music for any particular project. So I don't want those executives to make a judgment on a composer's reel based on a general reel, when really what they deserve is a bespoke reel based on what they're specifically asking for on a specific project. So I want to get that general reel thing out of the way. I don't think it's all that important to have a general reel, except for some special situations. Talking about the curated reels, so first, I think maybe we take a step back and talk about, when do we get a request for reels? That's an interesting thing to really think about, because relationships with filmmakers, between composers and filmmakers, trumps reels. So one of the ways that an agent's job can be easier is when composers have lots of great relationships with filmmakers, because when that happens, by and large, the filmmaker may know who they want, and then it's not necessary to do a reel. So let's talk about when they do want a reel. It often will mean that they don't know who they want. So that has to be thought about carefully, because it means that they're not predisposed to another composer that they may have worked with in the past, or somebody that they just think is the one. It means they don't know who the one is. And that means that there's a particular onus on the reels that we submit to be exemplary, if you will, because the way I calculate it, if a filmmaker or a studio is going out to our agency to get ideas, that they're also going out to the other agencies to get ideas as well. So in that calculation, it's likely that if that's happening, the filmmaker will be receiving, somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 to 25 reels for any project that they're asking for reels on. So that's a lot of competition. So that's why these reels should be put together with care. And what I mean by care is thinking about not just what's on the reel, but how much is on the reel, and thinking about the notion that they may play these reels in the way that you might listen to old style radio, switching from button to button to button and looking for a song that you really want to hear. So you may have 10 or 15 pieces of music on a reel, and they may take all of 5 minutes listening to all 15 tracks, meaning they'll give each track 10 or 15 seconds, or they'll listen to the first 2, 3, 4 tracks and then not go any further if they don't hear what they like. So
to that end, Randy, how do you then know how to balance something that like the kind of soundtrack that is just super, that's kind of uneventful and not like, basically, sorry to interrupt, but essentially, coming from an artist background, from somebody who makes concert music and records, how do you know? It's always a struggle to know how interesting should a track be. If it's interesting enough to keep their attention, it's probably too interesting to be in a scene. So that's the biggest dilemma for me.
well, I think that in my mind, track number 1 gives you the opportunity to do something that may be a little bit more complex and thematic, for sure, before you settle into the body of the reel. So I would use track 1. I always view track 1 as being the opening track that you hear in the movie. So if you put yourself in the movie, that first opening track that in the film that sets up the environment, the characters, all that stuff on a first cue when you hear a movie or a TV show, that's what I want to be my track number 1. Because often that thematic piece of music opening a film or TV show, that often is a theme that's used then throughout the show or throughout the movie and repeated. So that's going to be your most important piece of music. So the only way to get them to go to track number 2, of course, is to open their minds using track number 1. So track number 1 is, when I was in the record business, we always made track number 3 the hit song. You never wanted to open your album with the hit song, because you'd have the song and then it all goes downhill from there. So you'd kind of build it up, and then track number 3 was always the hit song. And then once they loved that, they at least got to track number 5, 6, 7, and then they became somebody who loved listening to albums instead of singles. Well, I think it's the same way here. is you need to get track 1 to get them to listen to track 2, and track 2 to get them to listen to track 3, and on and on and on. So I do sort of follow a general rule of starting with what would sound like the opening theme of a film or a TV show, and then settle down to an introduction of characters. And then after that would be track 2. And then track 3 might be the introduction of a particularly interesting character. And then starting with track 4, the action starts. And you can start to focus on all of the different cues that might be in a film. And once they get to track 5 or 6, you've succeeded really at that point in having them listen to your reel. But that's how I generally will put things together.
That's really helpful. I want to come back to you, but go to Chanda, who's got to jump to go for her Academy screening of her film Devotion. She's in the car outside the Academy, actually, right now. Chanda, you have such beautiful music, and it's just there's a lot of flavor in the music. What do you find are your most successful reels, and what do you feel are, what do you want to tell everyone about, your insight on making reels, and how do you concur with, how do you feel about what Randy just said?
I absolutely agree with him. Can you hear me okay? Sorry, I'm on the cell phone. Okay, great. Absolutely agree with him. Track number 1 absolutely has to be the banger. It's got to be the club banger. So usually when I put together a reel, I will choose the most impactful cue out of different scores. So it may not necessarily be a whole bunch of cues from one particular score, but like, if you've got a few scores under your belt and you've got some cues that you are really proud of, and you get comments from people saying like, oh, that made me cry or something like that, those are your club bangers. So like, choose those guys first. This is more like if you're putting together a general reel. I have put together quite I do have like a general show reel kind of thing that gets people interested, to let them know what I'm all about. And it's all the like, the big orchestral, like want everybody to know like Chanda does big orchestral, kind of thing. So, no mystery. But then for more tailored reels, for sure, like I will start with the most impactful cue of any of my scores, and then create tracks afterwards that have related themes. So it's kind of like you're going on an album journey with thematic material. So, and I found that has worked like gangbusters. Like you get them hooked in that first track. And the amazing thing with ReelCrafter is that you can actually see exactly how much a person listens to your tracks. Like you can see that they listen to 1M1 for 3 minutes and 2 seconds, but they skipped back 30 seconds or something like that. And then you can actually see if they just completely, skip a whole bunch of tracks and go to the end or whatever. So there's a lot of data that you can actually glean from seeing the action that's going on in your reels, like what people are really responding to. So if you find that people are responding to a certain cue more, and you'll know this because you'll have all of these 100% plays like shown in your ReelCrafter dashboard and Sam will tell you all of these details that I'm talking about. Like what is the dashboard and what is she talking about, 100% play, et cetera. You can actually use that data to create an even more impactful reel the next time around. So yeah, like I said, I've had great great responses, from reels that I've sent through ReelCrafter. So just using exactly what Randy said, hook them in and then take them on a journey. So
I guess, let me ask you this. I'm still struggling with how interesting to make each track, because I
yeah,
listen to
yeah,
your soundtracks, and you've got these beautiful themes and beautiful textures. Can everybody mute themselves if you're not talking, please?
yeah.
Okay, so I listened to some of your soundtracks, and you've got these beautiful themes and beautiful textures, and then there are quite a few cues in your soundtracks that are basically ambient, that don't
Mhm.
have a lot going on. And how much are you using those in your reels? And
I'm
I
not.
guess,
I'm not
yeah,
using those at all in the reels at all. Um, you know, Tracks like that, those are good for like if you have like music editor friends and they just want like a catalog of your music to like use as temp or something. Just you know, save that for that. But for your reel, it really is choosing the most impactful cues out of your entire soundtrack. So yeah, like like for example, After We Leave, there's like a lot of ambient stuff, and but there are a few cues that have a singable theme that sticks with people, and people have always like you know um gravitated toward those cues. So those are the cues that are on my reels and nothing else. So
and Randy, do you agree? I mean, you have cautioned me against putting too much what sounds like concert music in my reels.
Yeah. I disagree with Chanda just a hair on that. And it could have a little to do with that she's making her reels and I'm making reels for clients that isn't my music. So there could be a different perspective on that. I'm aiming to bridge what she's saying with the relevance of the music to the project. So I'm not gonna put just the most interesting stuff necessarily, even if it's ambient music. If I get a lot of requests from directors and filmmakers that say we need a lot of ambient music in our film. So I'm definitely going to give that to them. My dream is they listen to my reel and they go and temp with it. So if they can listen to even a piece of ambient music and say, "Oh my gosh, that'd be perfect when Johnny's getting his head cut off," I want them to do that. I want them to use that and hook into this music as temp music. So now what I do is obviously takes a little bit more of a risk in the sense that I am trying to really project onto the reel what I think the filmmakers are seeking. And I do ask them a lot of questions about that when I'm talking to them prior to making the reel. I get as much information as I can, the plot lines and the director's favorite composers and his favorite or her favorite scores and what's in the temp. If there's four or five different film music pieces in the temp from different films. I mean, I want to know all of the films they're using, and not just the film names, but even oh really, you're using something from that film? Are you using the ambient stuff, or are you using the action stuff? And so I try to get all this information, and then with that information, I feel comfortable taking the risk of not having every track sound like it's trying to say, look at me, because in films themselves, they don't have a lot of look at me moments for the score. A lot of it does have to play a supportive role, and I want to make sure that when they're listening to the reel, they're picturing this music they're listening to sitting in their film in certain scenes. So I think that's just a subtle difference from what
Yeah.
Chanda said.
yeah.
Uh,
Well, I just want to chime in because this is important from my point of view as a composer artist. Like when I look at the data on ReelCrafter, people are listening to the more impactful cues. And when I say impactful, I don't mean like John Williams ripoff. I don't mean like 100-piece orchestra for every single cue. Impactful means, something that hits you in the feels a bit. It could be a more simplistic piano cue, that has a theme that impacts, the listener. And so that's, like I said, just my point of view from data that I've actually seen in my ReelCrafter account, like over the past however long I've been using it. It's been quite a few years. And yeah, I personally have always found that they'll skip the ambient stuff and they'll go for the more, quote unquote meaty stuff. And like I said, meaty doesn't necessarily mean 100-piece orchestra or like, super crazy going wild, Jerry Goldsmith kind of thing. It's just, tracks that have a personality that show who you are. So, and that's my spiel.
I want to chime in. It's also very common for people to look at a reel and look at the waveforms visually and just jump to the parts that look like they're doing something. It's just a habit that people do, like, oh, this is quiet, therefore it's not interesting, which isn't always true, of course, but it's just built-in habit. They're going to jump to those peaks and listen because they think that that's where a lot of the more impactful thematic content might exist.
Let me counter all of that for a second, which is to say that your data that you're looking at only is giving you the data on what they're listening to. It is not giving you any data on what effect what they're listening to is having on them hiring somebody. So they may only listen to your ambient track for 3 seconds, but that might be because they only need to hear 3 seconds of the ambient track and say,
to know if it's right.
That.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great, and they may be listening to the really more interesting thematic pieces because they're more fun to listen to. But what the data that I'm looking at is who hires my composers.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Not like just what they think is interesting listening. So if I was doing, Lily and I have these conversations all the time about her reels, and I have these conversations with other composers as well, and I have to say to them, I know that you think this is a really important track that needs to be on the reel, but believe me, it doesn't need to be on the reel. What you need to have on the reel is what the filmmaker's asking for. And that's my job to interpret that, right? So that's what I mean when I say I'm willing to kind of take the risk as an intermediary between the composer and the studio and get as much information or enough information that I can so that I'm comfortable telling my composer that. Now, when I don't have the information, I'm happy to say to the composer, put whatever you want on there because I really don't know. So the whole thing's a crapshoot, and go ahead and put your best foot forward, and I'll send it on. But I'd say most of the time, I make a point to get that amount of information that makes me comfortable giving very specific advice to the composer on the reel.
Totally.
I want to say, Randy made a really good point. Just because they skip something doesn't mean they didn't like it. People get this idea that, oh, they skipped after like 40 seconds. Maybe they just, in that time, they got the information that they needed. They heard enough and they liked it. So like he said, ReelCrafter can't read their mind yet as to, with the effect it had on them.
I'm just going to chime in because Chanda only has 3 minutes left. And I want to come back to you, Randy, for a list of questions that you get in order to interpret what should go on a reel. So we'll come back to that. Chanda, I know that you are a huge advocate for ReelCrafter. So could you just list a few of your favorite features and maybe if you could, I know that what you love.
So well, mainly just being able to tailor a reel for infinite number of people, infinite number of ears. So, even if you're like, if you say you have a meeting with, a music supervisor at Sony or at Netflix, and, they're like, we have a few projects coming down the pipeline, One of them is, like a drama, and another one is more like a thriller kind of thing. Can you like send over some things so that we can just like give a listen? So you can actually create like separate reel, or even within the reel itself, you can divide, your tracks into here's the more dramatic kind of cues, so they can focus on those tracks, and then here's the more thriller kind of cues. um Essentially it's just very, very organized, very organized. And when you send these reels off, like you can track them, exactly like when they're opened, you know um who listens to them. Like you can see city and IP address. Obviously you don't see names, but you can tell if someone in Culver City opened it, it's probably someone on the Sony lot. So and you can see what they're listening to. And also, the ability to upload video. Now typically I don't upload video because I think people don't necessarily want to see other people's projects. They just want to imagine, your music to their project. So I really haven't used the video feature much, only for like concert works. Um, and so, yeah, it's more advantageous to use ReelCrafter as opposed to like Bandcamp or Spotify or things like that, because the algorithms on like Bandcamp or Spotify, might play another composer right after your track. And so, and you want to keep the focus on you. So, ReelCrafter is the most professional that I've seen, really. Most organized, easy to use. Yeah, so I can't speak highly enough of it. So
I know it's 11:30. I know you got a bolt.
yeah, I
Congratulations
really do.
on the film, and
Thank
best of
you.
luck. And we'll all be looking for where we can support you and amplify you and all of that. So thank you
Thank
so much for
you.
joining us.
Bye,
All right.
Chanda.
Bye
Nice
bye.
meeting
Thank
you.
you. Nice meeting you.
And so let's come back to you, Randy, before we go to you, Sam, to talk about your favorite features on ReelCrafter, which I want to know about, and then the inception of it, and and all of that. I got I got a direct message from somebody talking about using different genres in a reel, and and what are some of the good categories of, like, if I guess if I'm making my website and I've got my, here's comedy, here's drama, here's romantic, here's dark, or like, what are I've always had trouble subdividing, and what would you say the advantages of making a separate reel for different genres are, rather than just having the tags, which is a new feature? Is that a new feature, Sam, to be able to tag your cues?
No, that's been around. Like you can tag your tracks to sort of organize them better. But there is a new feature where you can have whatever tags you want on the reel, which is great for music libraries. They can use your own tags to filter the tracks on the page, so they can pick rock or certain moods or genres. That's a new feature, tag filtering.
So Randy, I mean, you're mainly talking about reels that are being sent specifically for, like, to a person who who the audience is, and I guess a lot of people who are on this Zoom are not necessarily don't necessarily have a direct person or they don't know who's going to be listening. They're basically just reaching out, like, okay, this is my comedy reel, this is my like, uh I guess, uh, help us out here. What do you think? What would be your advice for what do you think makes the best reel? What makes it most effective? And in terms of homogeneity, or like, especially if you've got a reel that's sort of genre specific, how much variation? And you've always cautioned me about against putting too much of violin, like too much of the things that I'm known for. Like, it shouldn't be too homogeneous or homogenous, but it what are the guidelines? How do you keep, what makes something effective?
Well, your reels, just to get that out of the way, are curated for specific projects. So let's just say that. When you talk about genre reels, I don't really know because I don't have any. That's not what we do. Now, I guess it's possible that a composer might be using ReelCrafter or something else or whatever. If, let's say, they were auditioning for a trailer house that they were looking to get hired to do trailer music. Because I know there's some companies out there that just produce trailer music. I don't know who they are really. I'm not in that, but if they were and they were looking for composers to hire on to be trailer composers, and they said, well, send me your reel, and the composer says, well, it's probably mostly action, right? They go, yeah, like, 80% of our trailers that we do are like action films. So send us your action reel. And then the composer would put together, an action reel. And translating that to their website, I think you have to kind of separate composers by their level of accomplishment when it comes to what you should feature on your website. So in the early days of a career, I think you have no choice but on a website to probably have a music page that separates by genre. Like you're saying, the comedy and Americana, drama, horror, whatever it might be. There's probably 6 or 7 common categories. But once you become a composer who's done some scores, you no longer have to or should break your music out by genre. And the reason why is because doing it by genre, it feels a lot like a music library. And you don't want a listener to view you as being somebody who contributes to a music library. You want to be somebody who's a composer of films and television shows and video games. So once you have enough music under your belt, then I think your website in a music page should just feature parts of the scores you've done. So now instead of saying, here's my drama reel, you're saying, here's my reel, here's selected cues from Ginny and Georgia. And you have that. And that is kind of a double whammy. Not only are you giving them music to listen to, but you're also promoting the fact that you're scoring a Netflix show at the same time. So you kill 2 birds with 1 stone doing it that way. But I do understand that you have to have scored enough projects to be able to do that to your website. I guess. And it carries over to a general reel. If somebody wanted a general reel, if they were somebody just beginning and didn't have a lot of stuff under their belt, then they're just putting random cues on the reel, right, to show what they can do. But if you're a more accomplished composer, you can put your reel together that says so-and-so cue from Ginny and Georgia episode 2, so-and-so cue from Ginny and Georgia episode 7, so-and-so from another film and another film. So you can put that on your reel and show where you pulled those cues from.
I'm getting a couple of questions about, I think a lot of people who are listening are meeting people, they might go to a networking party and meet somebody from Netflix who says, yeah, we're looking at, we're open to new, we've got stuff coming down, give me your card. And then they'll go to their website. And it really is a question of how do I get this person to think that I'm special? How do I get this person to consider me? And it's hard to know what and that is kind of like the general reel thing. How do I get them to even want me to curate a reel for them?
Well, first, I wouldn't send people to my website unless I was very confident in what was on the website. Even though I know that people build websites, composers build websites in order to direct people to those websites. That's one of the things you want to do with your website. But unless you're really confident that Netflix is gonna really respond to what you have on your website, I would send them there, because then again, they'll get the wrong idea because it's too general. So what I'd be doing is if I met somebody at a party and they worked in the music department at Netflix, or even another department at Netflix, and they said, "Oh yeah, we're always looking for cool new composers. You should send me something," or whatever. You're obviously going to get that person's name and email. That's really important, to get their name and email, right? So assuming you did that, then I would just simply not send them to the website unless the website is really special, and the music is curated in a certain way. And I would simply email them a reel and say, "Hey, so and so, it's great meeting you at the party, and I've put together some of my favorite cues from things I've scored, and hope you enjoy the reel." And send it to them. Send them something that you've curated just for them, that probably is focused. You have to take your shot, right? So you're not going to send them a reel that's got comedy and drama and horror and action. You're not going to do that, because I can guarantee you nobody at Netflix is going to care that you show them that you can score in any genre there is. No music executive that I've met believes that any one composer is born to do all genres. So composers tend to lean in one way or another, what they feel the most at home doing. If it's horror, let's say it's horror, just send a horror reel. That's okay. You don't need to show them that you can do everything, because you don't go from 0 to 100, you go 0 to 20. So if they respond to your horror reel, and you ever get to communicate with them again, you can say, "I would love to send you my action reel next." So you have to kind of knock it down one thing at a time, and not try to show people that you're incredibly versatile as a composer. I don't think versatility is a virtue most of the time.
And what happens if you end up on a project that you feel is, one aspect of what you do, but not really what you'd like to be doing? Like me, I'm on Ginny and Georgia, which I love, but it's not exactly my aesthetic. But so I would like to be steering my reel. I'd like to steer my work. I'd like my next project to be something that's a little darker. How do I bridge the gap between where I've been and where I'd like to go? And
Well, I mean, that's a bigger question than reels.
and I'd also like to, and we need to get to Sam, to include, like how do you feel that ReelCrafter is a part of this, and what do you feel are the most effective reels that you've seen in terms of, like, maybe this is a good time to actually ask Sam to share a couple of the reels that he feels are the most sort of impressive, and then you can comment on what you think their functionality is, relevance is for everybody who might be listening. So
Okay.
Sam, maybe you can talk about what you feel are some of your favorite, uh, favorite, you know, uh, features, and what you feel are some of the most impressive reels that you've got. And then Randy, let's hear your thoughts on it, please.
Sure. Going back to what Randy said about like the first track being impactful and kind of roping them in for the second and third track. The first three are definitely the most important ones. And sometimes you have a track that might start off kind of slow and there's a slow build to it, but there's a really impressive part that you want to highlight. In ReelCrafter, we have a snippet editor. It's a non-destructive snippet editor. So any audio you've uploaded, you can load up and you can cut down like to the middle section and save that, and then put that as your first track or wherever you want it. So that way you can kind of like jump to the main meat of that track without having them, be bored for 20 seconds. They're going to skip if it starts off slow. So that snippet editor comes in handy with giving you the ability to highlight what you want to highlight and focus their attention on. I can show you a couple reels. Obviously, we don't go digging through our customers' reels. That would be a big privacy violation. But we have a couple reels that we like to show people just to show what you can build using the platform. So I'm going to share my screen here. Just give me one sec.
And Trevor Morris has been really forthcoming with sharing his reels.
Yeah, he's been great. Yeah, we do get approval first before we share stuff like that. So let me just show you these. This is one example. It's a pretty basic reel. Like, it's simple. A lot of people could easily put this together, even like without the help of a designer. So basically, it just has a banner image at the top, and it's got some tracks and a bio at the bottom and social links. So this is quick. I mean, you could put something together like this 5 minutes or less, assuming like all your audio is uploaded and organized. It's really quick to do this. This is a different kind of layout. This is for a fictional band. So this is actually an EPK, electronic press kit, which is a little different. And it's obviously a lot more visually interesting. Like, you know, if you really dive into the Reel Builder and learn the ins and outs, you can do some really cool stuff with it. I'm gonna make sure this is muted.
If you don't mind, I think most people here are looking through the lens of film composers. So let's stick with.
Sure. I just to show you the ability of design features that you can put together. Like, you can really go off the wall here and just do really crazy stuff with it. Also, want to point out too, this is the tag filter I mentioned earlier. So if you want people to be able to filter your tracks down, they can do that, and you can see like these tracks rearrange and disappear based on what I've clicked. Also, you know, Randy mentioned people using your reel as temp. You can do that as well. You can set it so that your reel is downloadable. They can download just the entire reel. They can pick the original waves if you let them. This is an option, or they can just download the individual tracks. So they can click on these and then download and grab a single track and use it as temp. So that's really handy. And you have full control over that. Like, if you don't want them to download your music, then they won't have the ability to do that.
Okay, Sam, can you show us the snip function, like in real time?
Yes. Give me 1 sec. I have to.
Yeah, it's one of the best features. I love it. And
I didn't even know it had it.
Oh yeah, you can basically say, just like, you can edit any little piece of it. And then the other nice thing is that you can rename your tracks. And I like to name my tracks with titles that are relevant to the project that I feel that I'm aiming for.
Yeah, that's cool.
So just an example here. I can go into any track of mine, and this is the full waveform. But again, if I want to like focus a certain section of the audio track, I can just say create new snippet, and I can play this section, kind of preview it, and then I can give it a name, whatever I want to name it. And then you can set the fade in and fade out time as well. So you can be like a 2-second fade in, or 4, 0, whatever you want to do. And that's it. And you can make as many as you want, and they're all just easily accessible right here in the track. You have a snippet library, and then you can add this to the reel instead of the full track. So that's really useful.
Cool.
What are some of your other favorite features, Sam? And can we see a couple of other film composer reels? Maybe you could just bring up Trevor Morris's and talk about how he's utilizing it. And then I'd love to hear what Randy feels is like, if you didn't know who Trevor Morris was, and you received the reel that Sam will hopefully be able to share with us, what would you think?
I'm gonna ask my co-founder to dig up some links real quick. We'll have those in a second.
Great. Perfect. All right, well then maybe let's go back while you're doing that. Do you want to talk about some of your favorite features, or should we go back to Randy to talk about?
Actually, I have some really cool data that I want to show. Let me bring this up real quick. This is really interesting stuff. So just recently, we dug through the database and we dug up anonymized data, so we don't know what the reels are. We took data from 35,000 listening sessions. And so listening session is basically someone opens your reel, they play it, skip around whatever they do, and they leave. That's one session. So we took data from 35,000 of those sessions. And what we saw, the average reel duration was around 6 to 10 minutes long. which is perfect. It's like right where you want to be. You don't want to have it too long because it's just too much information and they will hardly even get past half of it. We also found that of those reels, they were listened through about 43 to 49%, which is pretty good actually. But if you have like 10 tracks or so, they're getting through 2.5 to 4 of those tracks. And that also ties in what Randy said, like make those the first 3 count, because a lot of cases they won't make it past those first 3. So this is pretty cool because it's probably one of the first times we've seen like hard data on this. Like every agent, every composer is given advice, first 10 seconds, hook them in, and you have like 2 minutes. But now we have data to kind of back up the anecdotal stuff that people have been saying. But yeah, I wanted to share that. I thought that was really cool.
That's cool.
Besides that, we've had, people surprise us. They use our platform in ways that we don't really expect. There's one person who he was pitching for an HBO Max TV series, and he put together a curated reel. Obviously, it was very specific, and he sent it off, and he could see the tracking data coming in, and he noticed that they kept gravitating towards a few certain tracks. So he went back into ReelCrafter. He edited the reel and added more tracks like that, like the ones that were getting a lot of traction, and then emailed back again, say, hey, I made a couple updates, check it out. And he got the gig. So he kind of used this like Jedi mind trick to zero in on what they really liked and added more of it. And it was pretty cool. We tell that story to a lot of people.
That's a good one. I'm getting a specific question. How do you control the volume? Is it possible to do you have any kind of not mastering feature, but is there any way to control the volume of a given track so that it, there's some sort of continuity within a reel?
Yeah, there isn't yet. We will be working on audio normalization so people can boost the volume of the tracks. That's the most common request. Like it's too quiet. I need to raise the volume. The best they can do now is they can download the original track. And if they don't have it locally, they can remaster it, and then they can replace the audio file on ReelCrafter, and it updates it everywhere on every reel. So it's kind of like Vimeo's replace video file. You can upload a new copy and it just replaces it seamlessly. But that's the best we can do right now. We sort of unofficially, we're kind of talking to Lander to see if we can integrate with Lander and have like a one-click mastering tool in ReelCrafter. So, some people are picky. They don't want to have like an AI mastering thing. They want to do it themselves. But there are a lot of people who do. They just want to just click it once and have it sound good because they don't have time to, mix and master it themselves or include an engineer.
Well, volume, even if it was just a question of even if it was just one feature to make something, louder or softer, that would be really helpful. So pie in the sky. Yes, please.
It's already, it's definitely already on the list.
Do you have any reels that we could look at and for Randy to weigh in on?
No. I mean, I have one for a pitch, but it's top secret, so I can't share it. I do have a link to a Trevor Morris reel. I'll show real quick here.
Yeah, let's do
that. We designed this. It's funny. We found that a lot of composers who were pre-established, they don't put a lot of time and effort into designing the reel to make it look really cool. So we do that. This is just for our own purposes, for marketing and video. But this is a Trevor reel that he approved with his music from Vikings on it. And I actually wanted to say too, although a lot of people keep it simple and they don't put a lot of design and work on the layout of it, some people do find it important. We got an email from one of our customers who's an Emmy award-winning TV composer, and I'll quote him. He says, "My favorite thing about ReelCrafter is imagining someone receiving my reel while another composer is submitting the way we all used to. The graphics and overall look of ReelCrafter says professional, and I believe there are producers that might make a decision based on the looks of the reel." So that was cool, and it's kind of surprising because he's a big shot and he doesn't really need to even demo probably, but the fact that he called out the importance of look, it matters. And we've had other agents too. Cheryl Tiano, who used to represent me, always talked about, like, it's your calling card, you're making an impact on someone. And so you want to make it look nice and make it look professional.
Could we listen to a track or two in terms of like, or Randy, do you have anything to add to, like, what do you, we're getting to the end of our time. So are there any thoughts you'd like to leave us with in terms of, you know, putting our best foot forward?
No, I don't. Trevor's a client, so we obviously, I think that looks great. That's a nice reel, Sam. And I've, only know of ReelCrafter, on the most basic, in the most basic way. I didn't learn about it until one of my composers, sent us one a couple years ago, and I thought it just looked great, and I've been directing everybody to it since. I think the only thing I would, in general, leave everybody with is that, as my friend Cheryl Tiano said to Sam, your reel is really important. And one of the things I would maybe emphasize for composers is don't rush putting the reel together. Don't, when like if I was saying to a composer, like there'll be times when I say, okay, you need to get me that reel by Friday morning. And the reel shows up like within 60 minutes. And I'm like, why would anybody do it in 60 minutes when they've got 2.5 days? Because to me, the more time you actually have to really think about it and think about what the filmmakers are looking for, doing your own research. A lot of films and TV shows are, for instance, based on books, or based on comic books, or based on documentaries, or based on previous films or TV shows. To spend the time to do the homework, 8 great tracks is a lot better than 25 tracks that a composer's sort of throwing against the wall. They're, and hoping that somebody listens to all that stuff. They're never going to listen to that stuff. So I would just say, take as much time as you're given to make your reel. And you say, well, I'm too busy, I can't. Well, then make the reel, but give yourself the time to revisit the reel the next morning to see if you want to make any changes, because circumstances change for all of us hour by hour.
Let me ask you, how many tracks would you say is the maximum? You've told me 15, no more than 15 on a reel?
I would say 15 is the max, but I mean, the sweet spot is 8 to 12. Okay.
And if you're, you're the one asking questions to a director or producer about what are some questions that you're asking, and if say one of us is talking to a director, what would be the list of questions that you would you kind of mentioned a couple earlier, but just to reiterate, like if say I meet a director and they're, so what are the questions that I'm asking in order to know how to make my reel?
Well, the first thing that I ask is, tell me in one paragraph about your film. Tell me what it is, and then they explain it. It's like a kidnapping movie, but there's a happy ending, let's say, or something like that. Then the next question I always say, like, in terms of the score, just in general, you may not be a musician, but just tell me, are you thinking that this is sort of a traditional score, like a lot of the things you've heard in the past, or is it a modern score? Is it David Newman, or is it Trent Reznor?
Mm-hmm.
I'll say stuff like that, because when you talk with filmmakers, they don't have the knowledge base. Most of them don't have the knowledge base that you think they have, or that you want them to have, in order to communicate musical ideas. So I'll usually couch those musical ideas into actually mentioning composers, like I just said, and is it like this, or is it like that? Is it like this, modern or traditional? Do you know what synthesizers sound like? They'll go, oh yeah, you mean like wham, wham, pa, 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 pa. Yeah, like it. Do you want to hear some of that? Yes, you know, and they'll say, oh no, I don't want to hear a synthesizer, even after they say they want something modern.
Right,
But
right.
a lot of us might take away that modern might mean it could have some synth in there, some analog synth or some pulses, some things like that. So I'll ask things like that. Then after that, it's about, is there anything in the temp, right? And then maybe after that, it's who are your favorite composers?
And let me ask you this. I've been cautioned against mentioning other projects to people that I'm working with so that they don't feel, you know, so how do you narrow it down if I'm not allowed to say like the score to Ozark to, you know, like if I can't mention other projects, how do I narrow it down?
Well, you could mention the composer of Ozark.
Okay.
Like, have you ever heard, I don't know, who did Ozark?
I think that's Saunders and
Okay, so
Jurian.
Danny, right,
Yeah.
jury, yeah. So I might say it like that. Oh, are you familiar with the music of so and so? And they'll say, oh yeah, yeah, we like their style, or yeah. And because then let them say, oh, what have they done? And then you could say, oh, I think they do that Ozark show, right? So
Yeah.
you're not the one who's putting the idea of mentioning the show first. But if they ask, it's okay to mention it, no problem. You know, if I say Trent Reznor, they go, oh, I don't know, I go Social Network. They go, oh yeah, 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 I like that score, you know, or whatever. So there's ways to be clever about it. But I think it's important to ask them about if there's anything in the temp or who, or, you know, are there you know, I do say, who's your dream composer? Like, because most of the time when this stuff comes up and you're putting reels together, there's usually a limited budget. So the way I get them to answer the question is by saying, you know, if you could have any composer, period, in the world, if you had $1 million for your score, what kind of composer would you want?
Mm-hmm.
And they'll usually mention a few, you know, or if they don't know the names of the composers, they themselves will mention the name of the movie or the TV show. So then that really gives you a lot of ideas, because the words drama don't really work, right? They don't really mean enough. Even comedy doesn't mean enough, because there's John Bryan style comedy and there's David Newman style comedy,
Right.
right? So even with that genre, you still have to break them down further.
Let me ask you this. A lot of filmmakers I've worked with, they will send me a Spotify list of their favorite music, and most of it, and a lot of it will be songs. So if
Yeah.
I'm dealing with, like, you know, obviously they need a score and they can't afford all these songs. So what would be, how do you translate a score reel response to a bunch of songs?
Well, first I would ask them. I would want to communicate with them about that. So if they said, you know, we want a score that sounds like this, and then they rattle off a bunch of U2 songs, I would then say something like, are you saying that, like, if you were able to take Bono's vocal off of these tracks, that you think that this music would be a good score for your film? If they say that, then that's self-explanatory, and you know exactly what they mean. But if they say, no, it still wouldn't work if the vocal was gone, what I'm really referring to is the lushness of it, right? Or so you do have to dig a little bit deeper and drill down to really know what they're saying. Because, I mean, somebody who doesn't know what they're talking about could say, no, it's not if the vocal was gone, and no, it's not the lushness of the production. It's these chords. They're so emotional, right?
Right, yeah.
And then you take that away from the conversation, is that they love the kind of emotion that's evoked by a U2 song, which might be what, like a lot of things in a minor key, for instance, you know, going from a root to a fifth to a third, you know, very basic kind of arrangements. Maybe that's what they like. So I think you do have to drill down further when they refer to songs as the feel of what they're looking for a score.
Okay. Are there any Sam? It's 12:02, 12:03, so we do need to start wrapping this up. Is there anything you'd like to share? Any other insight? Any more reels? Anything else you'd like people to come away with?
Yeah, I would say, our number one feature really is the tracking. And people should use that to, to gauge their next pitch, like to see which tracks are repeatedly skipped or which ones get the most attention. And, you can use it to gauge when to follow up too. Like if you're waiting for a response and they just listen to your reel, then you can back off for a few more days and just give them some time. So yeah, use the tracking, use that knowledge and that data to, refine your pitch.
Excellent. Well, I really appreciate both of you making the time to share your insight, and I think everybody does. And thank you, Chanda, and hope your screening is going great. With that, I will sign off and thank you, everybody, for participating. This was really a pleasure and insightful and helpful. Thank you.